What's up, y'all? You know what time it is? It's about to be that time.
I'm done. Cut the show. I'm done. Take me off.
Savage.
And we're back. One Piece 1098 is out, and we are effectively renaming the series Sad Piece. Or at least this flashback, I guess. Well, you read the chapter. You know why it's sad. Moment of silence for Ginny.
In the arms of the angel, fly away from here.
Savage.
When I saw Ginny standing next to Ivankov, I said in the stream, there's our death for the flashback, and boy, does it hurt to be right. The flashbacks follow a formula generally, so that was very much a layup, but the execution of it is still pain. It's pain. Yeah, it's just pain. Bonnie was finally introduced. She is the biological daughter of Ginny, which is what we were leaning towards, and not the biological daughter of Kuma, which is another thing we were leaning towards, because most good parents in this series, 9 times out of 10, 9.75 times out of 10, the good parent is a surrogate parent that is stepping up for the ones that fell away. There's a lot of topics to cover today. As always, Oda comes through with a surprise. On top of all of the things that we may predict right, he comes in with the curveball. The curveball is that Ginny was captured by celestial dragons. And Bonnie is actually now half celestial dragon, which I don't think she actually knew back during the archipelago when she saved Zoro from celestial dragons. I think that's just like a fun thing that we can call back to. I think Bonnie only learned about this from Kuma's memories. She only just knows this information now. But I think that 1098 gives me enough of what I need to predict the major points of the rest of the flashback. So if you want to know those, continue watching the video. There's a lot to get into. But first, like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. Like I said earlier, the flashbacks that Oda does, they have a pattern to them. And the patterns are usually deeper than just, hey, the faux parent is going to die. But Oda tends to pull from and invert things that he's done in the past, and I think that that's what we're getting here. A lot of people were drawing comparisons to Law's flashback. The white lead disease is similar to the sapphire scales. And while I agree, and we'll go down a rabbit hole on the sapphire scales later, the real flashback that we're dealing with here is Chopper's. And when I explain everything, you're going to understand what I am saying. First of all, I still believe that Bonnie is a clone of herself. Cloning is something that has been in the story for years now. We saw all of Judge's test tube soldiers, and then in Egghead we got the Oda box for Stussy, saying that she is the first successful clone of Miss Buckingham Stussy, who was a member of Mads and a member of the Rocks Pirates. Needless to say, at the beginning of that chapter, we get a narration box from Vegapunk saying, even if the world doesn't agree, I know that she is a living, breathing person, a true, undeniable human being. It was a success. I am certain of it, and this is one great step towards the creation of world peace. So the subversion here is that Oda wants you to think that the narration box is talking about Stussy because he's telling you that she's a clone at the end of the chapter. But this is really the horror movie trope, and sorry if I ruin horror movies for everybody right now. Generally speaking, in every horror movie, someone will say something like, who is the killer? Or they'll have a conversation related to that, and whoever is saying, I don't know, or walks into the room after that, or whoever the camera cuts to in the edit, they are the killer. When you rewatch it, you're like, oh wow, they foreshadowed it right there. Every movie does it. Anyway, Oda is doing that here. He's talking about a girl being a clone, and then the next panel is Bonnie. Bonnie's a clone. And we'll get into exactly why, but first some foreshadowing that she was always a child. It was in 1064 after she had just been crying about her daddy. She's with Luffy, old Chopper and young Jinbei, and she is looking like a 12-year-old. At the beginning of the arc, when we first see Bonnie, she's coming out of the eddy, right? And she is also in child form. She had just been swimming in the ocean, right? So that really should have been the first indication that she wasn't able to use her powers and would have reverted to her original form. And a lot of people did say that. I just was against the idea of Bonnie not being 22, 24 years old.
Long if you promise to be my girl. That sound like a deal to you? Huh?
No way, fat ass! I'll kill you!
The crime has already been committed.
What? I asked you nicely.
What's going on?
This lousy crew's indecent enough to begin with.
How are you tonight? I am Chris Hansen with Dateline NBC, and we're doing a story on Predator.
Damn it! That's not what I need to hear right now.
I know you're 12.
What? How do you know that?
Why don't you have a seat there and get comfortable for that?
Let's get moving!
And perhaps more shocking than the number of men is who they are.
Savage.
We have a couple more steps of this flashback, but the Vegapunk part is the biggest part that we're missing here. We ended this chapter with King Bakori trying to burn down the rest of Sorbet. Kuma's obviously going to get involved in this. Is this where he dethrones Bakori and becomes the king of Sorbet? During that time, does he use his new status as king to try and find more doctors? Is this how he comes to learn of Vegapunk? Does Vegapunk try using Kuma's DNA or something like that? It comes back Buccaneer, then they come to try and arrest Kuma. Bonnie ends up getting into the sun. The scales start to spread a little bit. Vegapunk feels responsible in some way, so he tries to help Kuma, maybe? There's different ways to make this happen, but either way, we get to Egghead, and Kuma and Vegapunk have to start trying to find a way to cure Bonnie. We see the scene of Kuma and Vegapunk talking about memories and how his power could probably manipulate those. So ultimately, the way that I see this flashback going is while they're trying to find a cure for Bonnie, and she is getting worse for the wear, I believe that Bonnie will succumb to the disease, just as Ginny did, and die. A number of scenarios can follow afterwards, including Kuma asking Vegapunk to make a clone of his daughter, or Vegapunk, knowing how much trauma Kuma has been through in his life, offering to do it himself, either with or without Kuma's knowledge. If it's without Kuma's knowledge, an interesting route would be Kuma thinking that it's unnatural and wrong, but he would still take the memories from Bonnie's former body and put them into the clone, except for the memories that she is a clone and that she died of her disease. A designer child with curated memories, and a piercing to cover up where her former disease was. He's going to hide from her the memories that she is a clone and just give her what she needs to continue her life and tell her, hey, you were cured. But in the process of all of this, Kuma is going to contract the disease. And in doing so, what I think is going to happen is he's going to start replacing the areas of his body that get the sapphire scales with cybernetic parts. As he becomes less and less human, he detaches further and further away from Bonnie because he doesn't want her to see him like this. Beyond that, he also doesn't want her to ever believe or think that she is responsible for his death. This is where it goes back to the Chopper story. Both of these characters would essentially be responsible for their faux father's demise, but both fathers would want to take it into their own hands to make sure that their children don't feel the burden of what they've done to them. Your mushroom won't kill me, Chopper. Your blue scale sapphire disease won't kill me, Bonnie. Vegapunk is going to replace every part of my body until I can't have this disease anymore. And it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt. Who is Bonnie's dad? A lot of signs are pointing towards J. Garcia Saturn. When did he become infatuated with Ginny? I would certainly hope it wasn't at God Valley, because otherwise we gotta call up Chris Hansen. Hi, I'm Chris Hansen from Dateline NBC. Why don't you have a seat right here? I don't think it has anything to do with Ginny at all. I saw a comment saying, what if Ginny's wanted poster is what attracted the Celestial Dragon? Potentially, if it's not Saturn. But I think this all goes back to the moment that we saw at God Valley. My favorite moment, where Kuma says, "Are you important, mister?" I don't think Saturn ever forgot that. I think that he has always been thinking about that, and his elitist mind has been plotting and planning Kuma's demise ever since. So when he saw an opportunity to take the woman that Kuma loved, he struck. That's the way to keep it dark peace. Just added her to his list of concubines because Kuma didn't know who he was as a 9-year-old. Even though he lives in secrecy at the top of the red line anyway. And especially because we believe that Kuma is coming either 1099 or 1100 to Egghead to fight Saturn, to save his daughter, to kill the man who may be responsible for the death of Ginny. It only feels right. And some super sleuths were doing some searching on the internet and found that the official stone of the planet Saturn is sapphire. This is the kind of stuff that Oda looks into, people. And one of the fun things is that the official stone of the planet Venus is diamond, going all the way back to the conversation between Mr. One and Zoro and Alabasta. What's next? Cutting diamonds? Zoro says that would be a waste. But Ethan Baron Venus Juro is definitely set up to be his opponent. And if his power has something diamond related in it, that could be very fun. Going back to the Ushi Oni lore, which we discussed when we saw Saturn's true form, potentially, or his devil fruit. The Ushi Oni dishes out incurable diseases. But what if all Gorosei members dish out incurable diseases? What if amber lead, white lead disease is actually a disease that comes from another Gorosei? Amber is the stone of Jupiter. So is Jupiter, is Alley-oop Jupe, responsible for Law's parents' death and everybody on Flevens? And Law's sister as well, potentially. This is not out of Oda's wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff that he builds upon. So that stuff feels really good to me. That feels right. Whether or not Saturn actually made Ginny his, concubine or anything like that, I still believe that he may be responsible for the sapphire scales disease. It's all just so messed up because Kuma didn't want to have a child with Ginny because he wanted to protect her. He didn't want to mix the blood and then have the celestial dragons and the government coming after Ginny like what happened with Clap and his mom. And being quote-unquote good didn't get him anything because Ginny did get captured by a celestial dragon anyway, and the worst possible scenario happened. Kuma's just cursed. He's out here worshipping the sun, and the celestial dragons make it so that the love of his life and his daughter can't step out into the sun and feel its warmth. The most painful thing in this chapter was Ginny saying, "Hey, I'm back in the lower world." That hurt more than her dying. That they broke her. Like, that was bad, Oda. You didn't have to do that, man. You didn't have to do that. I mean, didn't break her enough to the point where, she fought to get Bonnie to Kuma. To get to Sorbet. Get all the way from Marijoa to the South Blue. Like, you gotta give it to her. But to regurgitate the rhetoric? Ooh. What did they do? What did they do? I don't want to know. I kind of want to know. I don't want to know. We saw during the archipelago that the celestial dragons can have multiple wives, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. Other celestial dragons, could it be Roswald? Sure. Tie it into the Charlos of it all. Charlos' half-sister. But I don't know. I don't necessarily want that. Jalmac was brought up, the guy who killed Sabo. That would have fit more if this really did tie into ASL. But 1098 did start right after the ASL flashback. So everything where Ginny got captured was 14 years ago. But ASL was 12 years ago, and this chapter started in that 2-year period after Ginny got captured, right after ASL. So when they're talking about the Goa Kingdom and the refugees and the people that they were healing from the Gray Terminal, like they're talking about everything that just happened in the Ace, Sabo, and Luffy flashback. And they're getting this distress call from the South Blue, which Kuma's like, hey, I got some aggression I want to let out. I'm heading over there. He goes over there, frees everybody there, and then decides, hey, I'm tired. I'm going to go back home. This Ginny stuff comes out, and then he gets there right as she's died, and he doesn't hear her last words. That hurts too. That hurts too. Not as much as, hey, I'm in the lower world, but that still hurts. I went back and reread Egghead before doing this video, specifically targeting the moments with Bonnie. And an interesting thing that I noticed is that Bonnie still hasn't really reacted to Luffy in his Gear 5 Nika form. And this is a deliberate thing. The first thing that she says to Luffy, basically, when they arrive on Egghead, is, what's the deal with your wanted poster being all white and everything? And Luffy's like, that's just when I'm most free. But when he transforms to fight Lucci, she's passed out because she saw a bunch of beetles. It's a cheap tactic to make sure that she's knocked out and can't see Nika, because she would have a reaction based on how many times her and Kuma dreamed about this particular moment. Her tune about Luffy changes a little bit after she comes out of the memory bubble and we're back from the mini time jump that we did. I think it was Luffy, he even comments on it like, hey, you're chippier than usual. Those aren't the words. But I'm wondering if there's something in Kuma's memories where he actually put together before he wiped everything that Luffy is Nika. Like, what if Bonnie actually does know? And that's why she's being nicer to Luffy. Either way, she saw in his memories that, he's Dragon's son, he's connected to the Revolutionary Army, that Kuma went out of his way to save him and his crew. Like, that's kind of cool. She knows a lot more about the Straw Hats than she's letting on now because she's been inside Kuma's head. That's a potential thing that we could explore. Now, that's not to say that I think 12-year-old Bonnie is going to join the Straw Hats. Nah, but I think the Revolutionary Army might take her when this is all over. A key thing that still needs to be explored is Vegapunk said, basically right after she passed out, I think that's the right timing, he says there's something that I have to give her. So we don't know what that is. We know that he promised Kuma that he would not tell her what happened because it's too painful, right? She goes into the memories, she finds out anyway. And even if Bonnie ends up not being a clone and they did find some way to regress or even cure her, she's still learning potentially that her father got the disease and didn't want her to feel responsible for what he did to himself. Whatever Kuma did, he did it for her. But the thing that Vegapunk may want to give her, the cheap, bad pitch of it all is he's just got some sort of letter, right? He's got his goodbye note. He gives it to Vegapunk, hey, give this to Bonnie. And then as we're ending the arc and we're on the Sunny and we've got Vegapunk on board and Bonnie on board and maybe Lilith, and these are the only people that actually survived this situation, and at some point everybody's going to split back off, this is where Vegapunk hands Bonnie the note, we get a little sad scene, she cries, blah blah blah, epilogue. Maybe. There's a better way to do that though. That's not great, but that's kind of the realm of where I think this could go. This idea that Vegapunk has something for her. It has to be Kuma's final words or something. A better way, now that I'm thinking about it, is he goes to give her that note, she just pushes it back, and she's like, I already know what's in that. And then we go into the memory and we see Kuma saying it. That's the better way to do it. That's how you write it. Saw a lot of memes about Dragon being a fraud for not going to get Ginny. They're not wrong. They're not wrong. Hey, he went for Kuma though. right? He learned his lesson. Like, hey, I didn't save Ginny, but I'll go save Kuma. You gotta make mistakes to learn from him, I guess, but we also still desperately need to see Dragon do something. Anything, Oda. Anything. How much longer are we going to wait? I mean, maybe Oda wants to cool it now that we've seen Shanks finally do something. He's like, hold on, can't give everything away, guys. But that's still why I want Dragon to show up to Egghead by 1100, although there are still geographical hurdles that we've talked about. Kamabaka is in the Grand Line. They're in the New World in Egghead. A day has passed, but could you really get there in a day? Oda would have to invent some sort of wacky new form of travel that is super fast, or it's only Dragon that shows up and he can also teleport because he's got the wind fruit or something. But I would still want the Revolutionary Army ships to come and take out the other Marines as well. Sabo, Ivankov, like, Kuma's definitely coming. And the rest of the Revolutionary Army would make a lot of sense to be there to help out. Finally doing something. Part of me is also worried that Oda is going to jump out of the flashback so that he can get back into the Egghead present for 1100, and then jump back into the flashback later, maybe from Bonnie's perspective rather than from Kuma's POV. I don't know, I'd rather get everything now. Maybe I shouldn't even put that into the universe. Let's finish this flashback. But I almost feel like 1099 has to be like a speed run through all of this sorbet stuff, so we can get into the juicy Vegapunk Bonnie stuff of all of it. And that's going to wrap things up, guys. Thanks so much for hanging out today. Thank you so much, everybody that supports the channel, all of the members, and everybody that stood with me while I was on strike with both unions and could not talk about the One Piece live action. Well, strikes are over, so we can talk about the One Piece live action now. Season 1. Can't talk about Season 2. But stay tuned for a Season 1 review coming out at some point. I'm not going to put a date on it, but now that the strike is over, I'm going to get that all situated and sorted out, and maybe some other live action content. Stay tuned. In the meantime, like, comment, subscribe if you're feeling the vibe. And I'll see you later.
I've been swimming deep, deep. Savage.